What's up, everybody? This is Comrade Walter here. I'm gonna start doing a little new thing here. I'm gonna call it Ask AI, or Communist Ask AI. So a little bit of background. I am currently in PSA. I have a friend who is a part of SCP, the Socialist Equality Party, which is a Trotskyist group, supposedly a continuation of the Fourth International. There's a bunch of Trotskyist split-ups that claim to be the continuation of the Fourth International. So, Michael, please don't give me shit for saying that. Anyways, so one of the big questions that I've kind of been having, in my study of Marxist theory, has been just trying to understand what the transition from feudalism to capitalism actually looked like, right? Because, conveniently, this happens during, or right before the American Revolution, right? So here in America, we were taught all about the history of the American Revolution, and not really a whole lot prior to that. I mean, I feel like my history class in high school did teach a pretty decent job about, hey, industry came about. Didn't really explain capitalism, but explained that industry came about. I think we heard about the Cromwell Revolution in the 1600s in England, but that was about it. I mean, we learned about the Magna Carta, and then we learned the standard myth of, the Pilgrims came over to America for religious freedom because they didn't like the Church of England and they didn't like the king. So, anyways, without further ado, here is what I actually asked ChatGPT. Oh, yeah, before I go. So the SCP, the reason why I even mentioned him, they're coming out with Socialism AI, which is going to be a new AI system specifically for socialism and asking questions from a dialectical materialist perspective. I am asking ChatGPT this question. But whenever SCP releases Socialism AI, I will be quite eager and curious to check that out, and I might even ask it the same questions I'm asking here. Alright, so let's get right to it. What were some of the real reasons that people came over here on the Mayflower from a dialectical materialist perspective?
Here's the clearest dialectical materialist explanation of why the Mayflower passengers actually came to North America. Not the myth, but the underlying material conditions, class forces, and economic pressures that shaped their decision. The real reasons behind the Mayflower migration, dialectical materialist perspective. The traditional American story says they came for religious freedom. A dialectical materialist analysis says no group uproots their entire material existence unless the contradictions in their society become unbearable. So the question becomes, what contradictions in early 1600s England made this group choose migration as the only solution? Below are the core forces, economic, political, and class-based, that drove the Mayflower voyage. Number 1, rising class pressure under early capitalism. Between 1500 and 1650, England was undergoing the transition from feudalism to capitalism. Key contradictions: enclosure of land. Feudal commons were being privatized for sheep farming. This destroyed the rural subsistence economy, pushed people into poverty, created a rising proletarian surplus population. Even separatist religious groups relied on rural commons. Enclosure materially destabilized their ability to survive. Decline of feudal rights. Traditional rural communities were losing customary land use rights, local autonomy, protections from lords. Capitalist landlords replaced communal structures. For groups like the Pilgrims, this was catastrophic. Their religious independence was tied to economic independence, and both were disappearing. Number 2, state centralization and suppression of dissent. Under the early modern English state, Tudor, Stuart transition, the monarchy was centralizing power. This meant control over the church, suppression of local traditions, greater taxation, forced conformity. The Pilgrims were separatists, not mainstream Puritans. They were seen as rebellious, economically disruptive, ideologically dangerous. Harsh repression of unauthorized religious meetings, not because of religion, but because independent congregations challenged the state's unified ideological apparatus. The early bourgeois state needed ideological unity to stabilize capitalist transformation, so groups like the Pilgrims were criminalized. The choice became conform or leave the system altogether. Number 3, economic hardship and exile, why they left Holland. People often forget, the Pilgrims already fled England once to the Dutch Republic, but the Netherlands had its own contradictions. They became low-wage workers. In Leiden, they were textile laborers, printers, poor urban workers. They struggled to survive in a competitive capitalist city. Many were aging. Their kids were being absorbed into Dutch society. Their wages could not sustain multi-generational survival. Why leave the Netherlands? Dialectically, because they lost control over their own reproduction as a community. To be blunt, open quote, they could not materially maintain their way of life in an emerging capitalist urban economy. Close quote, America offered land, and land meant autonomy. Number 4, the desire for land ownership, material, not religious. Feudal Europe offered no affordable land. Capitalist Europe was fencing off what remained. America, by contrast, seemed to offer free land, community autonomy, escape from wage labor, a return to agrarian subsistence free from landlords or kings. This land was, of course, already inhabited. From a Marxist perspective, open quote, the Pilgrims sought land for social reproduction of their community, but this required settler colonial displacement of indigenous people, close quote. Their religious freedom required control over territory, and that could only occur in the New World. Number 5, Britain's imperial project. The Mayflower was also part of England's imperial strategy. Settle North America before Spain or France did. Establish loyal English outposts. Expand mercantile trade. Exploit resources. The Pilgrims got permission from the Virginia Company because they promised to be obedient settlers, productive colonial labor. From the state's perspective, the Pilgrims were tools of empire. From the Pilgrims' perspective, they were gaining material security by aligning with imperial capital. Number 6, the ideology was secondary. Religion justified material needs. Religion plays an ideological role in dialectical materialism. It expresses real class contradictions. It justifies movements driven by economic forces. It organizes people into unified groups. The Pilgrims' belief system provided discipline, helped them endure hardship, justified colonization, allowed internal cohesion, disguised material motives as divine destiny. They believed God gave them the land. Materially, capital and empire gave them the land. In summary, from a dialectical materialist perspective, the Mayflower migration was driven by 1, the crisis of feudal, capitalist transition, enclosures, loss of commons, rural collapse. 2, the coercive centralization of the early bourgeois state, suppression of separatist groups. 3, economic precarity in urban capitalist Holland, low wages, assimilation pressures. 4, the need for land for survival and autonomy, reproduction of their community required territory. 5, English imperial expansion. They were part of a larger colonial class project. 6, religion as ideological justification, a superstructure built on economic material foundations.
Alright, so yeah, as you can see, little bit different than what the actual story we were told. You know, so one of the things they talk about is the enclosure of land. And I asked it some more questions about this because I still have a bit of trouble understanding how the transition from feudalism to capitalism actually worked for regular people like me, and that's going to be my next question I ask it here. But essentially, you know, the monarchy was centralizing power. You know, there was some repression of different religious groups, but mostly it was the economic conditions of why they came over here. You know, beforehand, you know, you were tied to the land, and this is something we'll get to see more here. But being tied to the land meant, you know, you couldn't really decide what to do, and here comes this discovery of America. Hey, look, all this land over here, I can jump ship out of my situation and go somewhere else and start a new life. And that is basically what they did. It's something that I kind of think about often. It's like, man, I wish I could, like, figure out a way that, like, I could uproot my life, go to some new place, and settle somewhere else and start a new life, start a new community. And that is kind of like what the opportunity that the Pilgrims had. I think about that living here right now in America, and I'm pretty sure those are the kind of thoughts that, like, my ancestors, because I do believe I have some Scotch-Irish that came on the Mayflower, although I don't know too much about that. I didn't really get to know about my dad's side of the family, but when I did get to see my dad's father, that's what he mentioned. But yeah, I mean, just, that's kind of why I've been thinking about this, is like, what led people to, actually come over here, right? Because, like I said, like, I feel that way right now, Nepal just had a revolution, I wonder if I could somehow get out of here and settle in Nepal. Anyways, next question I got for ChatGPT here. I guess I have a hard time visualizing what everyday life would have looked like under a feudal system, and the change to capitalism, and how the change to capitalism would have affected me. This history isn't really taught to me. Remember, I grew up in the USA. It's quite convenient that we had the revolution when the transition from feudalism to capitalism started.
Absolutely. And you're right. American schools skip the entire transition from feudalism to capitalism, which makes it hard to understand Marxism or even early modern history. Let me give you a clear, visual, almost cinematic explanation of 1. What everyday life under feudalism looked like. 2. How capitalism shattered that world. 3. Where an ordinary person, like you or me, would stand in that shift. 4. Why the U.S. Revolution happened after the transition. Conveniently skipping feudalism entirely, I'll make it vivid so you can feel the change. Number 1, everyday life under feudalism, in 1100 to 1500s. Imagine your entire world is a village of maybe 300 people. Everyone knows everyone. Nobody travels more than 20 miles. Your status is fixed at birth. If you're born a peasant, you stay a peasant. Your kids will be peasants. Moving away requires your lord's permission. This isn't employment, it's a relationship of mutual obligation.
Very different.
Your daily life, you wake up in a thatched hut with a dirt floor, your animals inside, no privacy, smoke from the fire filling the room. You work your lord's fields, mandatory labor, your own small plot to survive, common land for grazing or wood gathering. The rhythm of life. Life is predictable. Harvest in autumn, repairs in winter, planting in spring, weeding, summer tasks.
So
There's no factory, no wage labor, no job search. Your work is determined by the season and your feudal obligations. What you owe days of labor, a portion of crops, fees to use the mill, fees if you get married, fees if your ox dies, rent in crops or goods. The Lord protects you from bandits and famine, theoretically. It's a world of stability but no freedom. There is no concept of unemployment because no one is employed. Everyone works because the system requires it. Survival depends on being tied to land.
So, yeah, like I said, not really taught this in American history class, were we? I mean, think about it. Imagine you are a regular peasant, right? Your family, for generations was born and raised on this land. You've always had to deal with the Lord. The Lord's always been an asshole, always, fucking with your life. You don't really have control over that. But this is your fucking home, right? You've lived here for years. Your parents were peasants. You're going to end up living on this land. It's not really freedom, but it's a stable life, right? That is something at least feudalism did have over capitalism, was at least having a stability in life. You know, you had the village, you know. I mean, a whole other thought about, like, raising children and shit, you know, the saying that it takes, like, a village to raise a child. We don't really have that sense of community because capitalism has so alienated us from each other, you know. So yeah, you're tied to the land, you know. And it was true, you know. It was a dirt floor. You had your animals inside. You didn't really have your own privacy, you know. And it was dangerous because smoke from fire filled the room, so you know you had dangerous carbon monoxide. At least industrialization has gotten us air conditioning, you know, central heating, you know, all those things have definitely helped. I see the advantage of transferring to a techno feudalist system or something like that at this point, but no. I'd rather move to a socialist system, though. Thank you. But I mean, you know, you work for your lord, you know, and I mean, this is the most interesting part. You know, you have a pretty predictable life too. You know, you have harvest in the fall, you do stuff in the winter, you know, and you prepare the winter in. You do your planting in the spring, and then you have regular summer tasks. You know, there isn't a factory. There's not a wage labor, you know, and there's no need to search for a job or apply for a million fucking jobs. You have your obligations of, like, you know, you owe days and labor and shit, you know, but here's also the other thing that, like, they didn't mention, or ChatGPT didn't mention, was, because of the Catholic Church and because of the whole, like, Sabbath rule and shit, you know, like, you weren't required to work on Sunday, like, period. You know, like the Lord can actually get in trouble for forcing you to work on Sunday. Or, you know, even like religious holidays. You know, we have what our bank holidays today, which is kind of like the continuation of that. But, like, a lot of those holidays were, like, all peasants don't work that day because it's an insult to God to work on that day. So, you know, we actually work more than what the peasants worked from back then. You know, and when capitalism kind of came along and changed everything.
Number 2, the shift toward capitalism, 1400s to 1700s. Now, everything changes violently. Capitalist transformation begins with sheep.
It is interesting that it all begins with sheep. You know, especially, you know, with, you know, the right-wing media wanting to call everybody sheeple because we want a better world. Alright, cool. It all started with sheep. Alright, but sure.
Wool becomes profitable. Landlords want fields, not peasants. So they begin enclosures, fencing off land, kicking peasants out, converting villages to pasture. Suddenly, people who lived on land for generations are evicted. Commons disappear. Traditional rights vanish. You as a peasant become a vagabond overnight.
But yeah, so the enclosures. This is something we definitely are not taught in American history class. Maybe some of us are, you know, but, like, I don't remember learning about this. Or maybe we did go over it and it wasn't really, like, fleshed out a lot. It might have been like a blurb, right? But like I said, imagine this. Your entire fucking family, your entire family's history lived on this fucking land. And all of a sudden, the Lord decides, you know what, wool is very fucking profitable. I want to sell some more wool. But there's all these fucking people in the way here, you know, there's all these, what if I just kick them the fuck out, close off this land, and make that just for the sheep and, the people, I don't have to worry about that. We'll convince the king to figure something out and let me get rid of them, you know. But yeah, let me get some more fucking land and fuck these people who've been living whose families have been living here for thousands of fucking years. I mean, probably not thousands, more like hundreds, but still. You get the point.
What daily life becomes under rising capitalism? Your old village is fenced off. Your family is homeless. Your choices. 1, become a wage laborer in a town, low pay, dangerous. 2, join the army or navy, often forced. 3, become a servant. 4, starve. 5, steal and risk execution.
So, I mean, that is basically what happened, right? You know, and then, you know, instead of the feudal system, now they can, like, you know, instead of controlling people, they're controlling capital, you know, which is very interesting. So, yeah, so, once your village was forced out, was fenced off, and your family became homeless, well, now you have, like, a couple of choices. You can become a wage laborer, you can join the army, you can become a servant, which is essentially a rich person's slave, or like a maid, you know, like a butler, maid, you know, that's basically what that is. Starve to death, you know, that's always an option, starving to death. And then steal and risk execution. So, you know, you can do a wage labor, join the army, become a butler, starve, or steal. Pretty much your fucking options right there.
New economic laws appear to discipline the new working class. Laws make vagrancy illegal.
So now the new economic laws appear, you know, to discipline the new working class. So vagrancy. Oh, vagrancy is such an interesting. Actually, wait, real quick. Define vagrancy.
Sure. Vagrancy traditionally refers to the state of wandering from place to place without a permanent home or a regular employment. Historically, it was often used as a legal term to describe someone who is homeless and living in public spaces, and it was sometimes criminalized in various places. Nowadays, the term isn't as commonly used in legal language, and there's more focus on the broader issues of homelessness and housing instability.
Okay, so basically vagrancy is just being fucking homeless and shit. And just not working, right? That's kind of how I understood it, because I remember, like, in, like, you know, after slavery ended, there was also a lot of, like, Jim Crow laws that, like, define vagrancy as a criminal punishment, right?
Yeah, you got it. Historically, vagrancy laws were definitely used that way, especially after the end of slavery in the U.S. Those laws often criminalized being homeless or unemployed, and they were used to target and control newly freed black people and other marginalized folks. So yeah, it's basically what you said. Being homeless and jobless was turned into a crime in a lot of those old legal contexts.
Alright, thank you very much. I appreciate you.
You're very welcome. Always happy to help break it down.
Alright. So yeah, for those who don't know what fucking vagrancy means, where was I?
Wages are capped.
Vagrant.
Masterless men are criminalized.
Wages are capped, which means, you know, there's not a minimum wage, there's a maximum wage, you know. Yeah. And then masterless men are criminalized.
Begging becomes punishable by whipping or mutilation. This is where work or starve begins.
But yeah, and now they can whip you or mutilate you for begging. Man, so a lot of people would whip me if I was living back then. I'm so poor.
Your life becomes precarious. Unlike feudalism, where you had access to land, community support, guaranteed work. Under capitalism, you must sell your labor for wages. You depend entirely on the market. You can be fired. You can be homeless. You can starve. The material stability of feudal life is replaced with the freedom to die.
Anyways, but yeah, your life becomes precarious, you know, once, like I said, in feudalism you had access to land, community support, and guaranteed work. Under capitalism, you must sell your labor for wages. You depend entirely on the market. You can be tired, you can be homeless, and you can starve.
Everyday life. Once capitalism takes over, 1700s, 1800s. Now imagine you're living in early industrial Britain. Your job is 14 hours a day, dangerous, low pay. Your employer owns your time, your tools, the building. You own nothing but your ability to work well. Children work in factories. Families break apart chasing wages. Consumption replaces subsistence. The world is no longer local. It's global trade, empire, and wage labor. This is the world the Pilgrims left behind.
And then everyday life in once capitalism takes over, which I don't really think I need to discuss this too much here. We live in capitalism today. You know, the only difference was, like, they had 14 hours work days. It was a little bit more dangerous. They didn't have labor laws. You know, your employer owns your time, your tools, building. You own nothing but your ability to work. You know, standard, you know, you're a fucking proletariat. You know, children worked in factories. They had child labor back then. You know, families break apart, you know. And also the world is no longer local, it's a global, you know, it's global now, you know. Where before, you know, all your life consisted was like your fucking village and that was your world, and now the world has kind of become all interconnected, kind of thanks to capitalism.
Number 4, and why the U.S. avoided teaching any of this. The United States was founded after capitalism triumphed in England. There was no feudalism here, except in modified plantation form. Yeah. So Americans grow up believing wage labor is natural, private property is natural, land is something you buy, not something you're born tied to.
Right.
Work is something you apply for. In reality, all these ideas were produced by the destruction of feudalism, the rise of capitalist property relations, the enclosure movement, the creation of a wage-dependent class. America was a product of capitalism's violent birth in Europe. That's why American schools never teach feudal obligations, enclosures, primitive accumulation, peasant revolts, the brutal laws that created wage labor. If they taught that, people would understand. Private property is historically contingent. Wage labor is not natural. Capitalism emerged through violence. Alternatives are possible.
So why did we not really learn this here in the U.S.? So, I mean, the simple answer is we just didn't have feudalism in the U.S., you know, after the Revolution, or like even prior to the Revolution. You know, the settlers came here and they established their own system from the start. You know, that, like, you know, they swore fealty to the king back in England, but, I mean, for the most part, they were pretty much fucking autonomous and could do whatever the fuck they wanted, so long as they brought profits back for the Virginia Company. You know, so, like, we kind of believe that, like, you know, our wage labor system is kind of natural, you know, that the whole system of private property is natural. And that's the other thing, too. You know, keep in mind, the land was not fucking free land here. It was already fucking inhabited. You know, but, like, you know, and the whole reason why I'm trying to do this is to, like, give, I guess, in a way, to give white people a fucking story that doesn't paint them as the fucking bad guy, but them as the fucking victim of capitalism as well as everybody else. You know, and I'm going to get some controversy for saying this, but, like, this is the narrative that needs to be shared. Like, yeah, your ancestors came over here because of economic hardship, and you were forced over here because your families were kicked off your fucking land, you know, and then you came over here to this new land, you know, to find freedom, you know. It ended up happening that you ended up serving capital, or your ancestors ended up serving capital and stealing the land for capital, but they themselves are still the victims of the economic system of capitalism, right? That's what I kind of need to get through to people's heads, or get through, you know. But yeah, all those ideas, you know, came from the destruction of feudalism, the capitalist property relations, you know, and you know, and also the enclosure movement too, and the creation of the wage-dependent class, which is the proletariat or the working class, you know, and America was pretty much just a product of capitalism's violent birth in Europe. So I mean, basically, we got to set up the capitalist system here without the feudal system already kind of being in the way, because we had that autonomy to do so. You know, so that is why, I mean, Wealth of Nations came out in 1776 by Adam Smith, you know, which is basically the guidebook to capitalism. But yeah, I mean, imagine, I mean, like, we don't teach about the feudal obligations, the enclosures, you know, the peasant revolts, which there were a lot of in England, a lot of peasant revolts. Actually, even throughout just history in general. And then the laws that created the wage labor. You know, if we were taught that, you know, we would understand that, like, you know, private property is historically contingent, wage labor is not natural, and capitalism emerged through violence, and alternatives are possible.
Number 5. If you lived in each system, what would it feel like? If you lived under feudalism, you would never worry about rent. You would never be homeless. You would always have food, barely. You would have almost no freedom. Your life would be stable but controlled. If you lived during the transition, you might become landless. You could be arrested for vagrancy. Your family might be forced to migrate. You'd face hunger, begging, or early industrial work. If you lived under capitalism, now, you have freedom, but at the cost of insecurity. You must find employment or you starve. Your survival depends on the market. You can move anywhere, but can be evicted anywhere. You live in individualized uncertainty.
You know, in feudalism, you never have to worry about rent, you never have to be homeless, you know, you would always have food, you know, you would always, but you also have, like, basically no freedom, and your life would be stable but controlled. You know, if you lived during the transition, you became landless, you know, you could be arrested for vagrancy, your family might be forced to migrate, you'd face hunger, begging, or even the early industrial work. I mean, fuck, imagine, like, you know, you get kicked off the fucking land that, like, your family has lived on for hundreds of years, and then you gotta be like, oh shit, I gotta figure out some way to feed myself. Big factory over there, man says, hey, let's work for me, and we'll pay you a wage, and you can pay yourself, and don't worry about anything else, you know. And I go, and I work this fucking factory job, you know, like, I can say textile, you know, mining, you know, whatever the fuck it is. Let's just go with textile work. You know, there's this big fancy new machine that can do all the work for me, and all I have to do is just put this, and oop, got off my arm. Uh-oh. Where'd my arm go? Well, I don't have an arm anymore. Yep. So, I mean, that's that's basically I'm sorry. But yeah, but now, you know, you have the freedom, right? We have individual freedom under capitalism, right? You know, but we must find employment or we starve. Our survival depends on the market. On the invisible hand of the free market depends on whether or not we get to live or die. I mean, basically social Darwinism, you know, but, you know, in economic form. You know, you can theoretically move everywhere, but you can be evicted from anywhere as well. And, you know, yeah. Alright. So the next question I go ahead and ask ChatGPT here is, you know, because reading all that, you know, it's like, feudalism doesn't sound too terrible compared to my current fucking situation. Yeah. So, you know, a background to even why I would even say that is, I've been homeless off and on since COVID started. You know, I didn't get to really have my parents growing up. You know, my dad was, like, put in jail. You know, my mom didn't have the best, like, mental health, you know, so she was kind of, you know, she was taken away from me when I was little. You know, so, like, you know, whenever my mom had custody of me, I didn't have a stable community to go to. You know, the state took custody of me for a little while, and I was kind of bounced around between, like, different places, you know, until, like, they finally were like, okay, let's give him to my mom's parents, right? You know, but, like, under that feudal system where you are tied to the land, you know, even if something happened to your parents, you still had that community around you that you could be a part of. You know, and that's something I feel that, like, I've always kind of felt, because I felt alienated from society because I don't have that sense of community, right? Anyways, this isn't therapy, this is a discussion about the Mayflower and how the transition from feudalism to capitalism actually worked, right? Trauma. Anyway, so I go ahead and I ask it, so if we go ahead and we transferred from our current mode of capitalism to an era of neo or techno feudalism, how would that work? You know, very, very interesting question here, you know, because that's honestly is the direction I think we're moving to, whether we like it or not, because those are what the tech oligarchs want, and that's what they have the power to do. So let's go ahead and hear his answer here.
Here's the clearest way to visualize neo-feudalism, techno-feudalism, from a dialectical materialist perspective, not just as a buzzword, but as an actual mode of production emerging out of the contradictions of late capitalism. I'll break it down as 1. What defines feudalism? 2. What defines capitalism? 3. What defines techno-feudalism? 4. What everyday life would look like. 5. Where you would fit into it. This will make it real, not abstract. Number 1. What feudalism actually was. Feudalism equals control of people through land plus hereditary obligations. Lords control land, peasants are tied to land, economy is local, mobility is restricted, violence enforces hierarchy. The key feature? You don't pay rent, you owe service.
Right.
Number 2. What capitalism is. Capitalism, control of people through the market plus wages. Capitalists control capital. Workers sell labor for wages. Mobility is high. Everything becomes commodified. Market competition governs life. The key feature, you're free to labor or to starve. Number 3, what techno-feudalism is. Techno-feudalism, control of people through digital platforms plus debt, subscriptions, data plus surveillance. It resembles feudalism because big tech firms act like lords, users, workers act like serfs. Instead of land, they control digital infrastructure. Instead of forced labor on fields, you provide data, content, engagement, and loyalty. Instead of hereditary rule, you get algorithmic rule. Key features. Platform monopolies. In capitalism, firms compete. In techno-feudalism, they own the marketplace. Amazon, Google, Meta, Apple, Tencent, Alibaba, they no longer compete. They govern.
Right.
You don't own anything. You rent everything. Cars equal subscriptions. Software equals subscriptions. Entertainment equals subscriptions. Housing, Airbnb, or corporate landlords. Data, owned by platforms. Devices, locked ecosystems. You become a tenant in a digital manner.
So again, the discussion. So yeah, what feudalism actually was, you know, because it's important that we really define all of these terms, right? So it's the control of people through the land. Again, you as a peasant, you're tied to the fucking land. Your economy is local, your mobility is restricted. Under capitalism, this is control of people through the market and wages. Capitalists control capital, we workers sell our labor for wages. We have high mobility, but, and everything becomes commodified, and market competition governs life. Techno-feudalism, and this is the interesting one, is control of people through digital platforms, debt, subscriptions, data, and surveillance. So basically, here, let's kind of get into this. It's a lot like feudalism because, like I said, the big tech firms, they act like the lords. The capitalist corporations are the new lords. Elon is the lord of Twitter. Tim Cook is the lord of Apple. And then we, who, use those platforms, become serfs to the to those platforms. We essentially swear our loyalty to a platform, and...
Surveillance replaces the medieval church. Instead of priests telling you what's moral, algorithms tell you what's allowed.
But yeah, you don't own anything, you basically rent everything. And instead of, the medieval church and the Spanish Inquisition, you have essentially AI surveillance. Everything we do is basically being surveyed by Palantir right now. Let's see. But, yeah, and like I said, loyalty replaces church, instead of, being tied to the land, you pledge your loyalty to a subscription service, whether it be, Prime, Nintendo, Uber One, or even your fucking visual media, it'd be a whole thing, you will own nothing and you will be happy, the renter economy, as everybody has been calling it, right? That is basically what techno-feudalism is. It's the renter economy.
Loyalty replaces choice. In feudalism, people pledge loyalty to lords. In techno-feudalism, people pledge loyalty to platforms. Prime, Apple ecosystem, Xbox, PlayStation, banking, credit score, phone OS, app ecosystem, AI assistants, social media identities. Your entire life becomes tied to a platform lord.
Yeah. Instead of the land, though, they control the digital infrastructure, right? They can control the internet, they control the algorithms, and even the AIs. And especially with, Facebook and Amazon becoming monopolies, at least under quote-unquote free market capitalism, under quote-unquote free market capitalism, there's, in theory, competition, right? If I don't like Facebook, I can go find another fucking platform. Let's be real, I can't do that. As much as I want to, I grew up using Facebook. There are people that I'm gonna have connected to through Facebook that, I would lose that connection to if I happen to delete my Facebook account. Right? And that's, and if I were to do that, I'm not sure how I would, give a message to everybody, hey, this is what I'm doing with, and wondering if the algorithm is even going to show those people that or not. Really using Facebook has been kind of interesting to kind of see how all that works.
Debt peasantry replaces wage labor. People spend their lives paying student debt, rent, credit card debt, subscription fees, medical debt, auto loans, payday loans. Your future labor is already owned by creditors.
So yeah, this is the big thing I'm worried about. The whole debt peasantry replacing wage slavery. Did I say labory? Like, did I mix slavery and labor together? Oh, God. Labory. I can't talk. Okay, yeah. The debt pension tree and wage slavery. I mean, it works. I mean, we use the term wage slavery all the time, so I mean, that's probably why I said it that way. But, you know, instead of saying wage slavery, I said wage labory. But yeah, this is the thing that I'm really fucking worried about, is the debt pension tree. Anyways, after my little fuck up there, so yeah, kind of what I'm worried about is them bringing back indebtedness prisons. Because if you recall, the 14th Amendment of the Constitution outlaws slavery for every instance except for indentured servitude. Right? So, that means what we're going to end up moving towards, if we're going to continue to transition to techno-feudalism, is new vagrancy laws, which they already are kind of doing. I mean, they're rounding up homeless people in Utah and detaining quote-unquote undocumented people. Right? So, I mean, we're already seeing this transition kind of play out right now. I mean, this is basically what Project 2025 is, right? It's essentially a techno-feudalist revolution is what is happening right now. And that is basically what we have been witnessing for the past year. It has been a techno-feudalist revolution taking place right under our noses, right in front of our eyes. And I think that's something that we need to be aware of and, like, understand that this is a revolution that they are waging with the power, and we need to be fighting back against this revolution. In fact, this is the moment where, like, we need to be the reactionaries to the revolution. But yeah, I mean, but think about this. You know, we got medical debt, student debt, you know, I personally have a payday loan debt that, like, I wasn't ever able to pay back because I had a job, and then I moved, and then I wasn't able to keep up with the payments for that loan, and so I kind of have defaulted on that. Me personally, I'm kind of scared they're going to throw me in a debtor's prison, and then they can legally make me a fucking slave because, you know, 14th Amendment says indentured servitude can do slavery. So, yeah, I'm kind of worried about that for me personally. And there I go confessing that to the AI algorithms that's gonna fucking hear me and come arrest me. Very smart fucking move. Yeah, fuck you. Fuck you, you feudal lords, and fuck you, you AI fucking monitors. Fuck you.
Number 4, everyday life under techno-feudalism, a visualization.
So this was the interesting part here. What your everyday life is going to look like under techno-feudalism.
Imagine your day, morning. You wake up in a modular pod apartment owned by a corporate landlord like BlackRock or We Live. You don't own the walls, appliances, software, thermostat, locks. Access is tied to your digital ID. Work. Work is no longer a job. It's gig tasks, content creation, micro-labor, algorithmic piecework, corporate service roles. Your income is unpredictable, dependent on ratings, dependent on engagement, dependent on your debt score. Capitalism, you sell labor. Techno-feudalism, you sell your entire identity.
You know, work, it's no longer going to be a job, because let's be real, AI is going to take all of our cognitive jobs, all of our paperwork jobs, AI is going to take a lot of fucking jobs. So, you know, because of that, you know, we'll be reduced to gig tasks, you know, doing fucking Uber Eats and shit like that, or trying to post shit on the internet and hopefully make some fucking money. Maybe. Donate to my Patreon, subscribe, send me money to my Cash App, please. I really would like to eat. I would appreciate that. And I'm working in a gas station right now, but I mean, I'm not sure how well that's gonna end up working out. Uh, but yeah, and then there's gonna be gig tasks, content creation, micro labor. What is this algorithmic piecework? That's something I'm gonna have to look up. And corporate service roles. So basically like HR and shit, and like humans managing. I guess that's what that is. It's like humans managing what the fuck the AI is doing. Like you need at least a human there to make sure that's not doing fucking nonsense. You know. But yeah, income will be unpredictable, all depending on whether or not you're getting engagements, good ratings, and whether or not you're in debt. Uh, so in capitalism, you sell your labor. In techno-feudalism, and this is the thing that, like, I feel like we're already kind of been seeing since, like, at least the start of social media, but in techno-feudalism, you sell your entire identity.
Food you rely on: Uber Eats, Walmart Plus, Amazon Fresh, smart kitchen subscriptions. Prices adjust instantly through algorithms. You have no bargaining power. Transportation: you don't own a car. You rent one from Tesla Network, Waymo, Uber, Zipcar. You cannot modify or repair it. You pay monthly to unlock features.
For food, we are starting to rely on stuff like Uber Eats, Walmart Plus, Amazon Fresh. Where prices can just adjust instantly through the algorithm, and you don't really have any bargaining power. I mean, you could still go out to the store, hopefully, and actually engage in the community, and that's what I hope is what we can do. For transportation, now me, I already live this, right? I've kind of already been living this because I kind of been getting my food on Walmart Plus because I don't have a car, right? I ride a bike everywhere. But transportation, you don't own a car. You rent one from either the Tesla Network, Uber, Zipcar. I know DoorDash or Z-Trip, they have fucking programs where you can rent a car from them if you have a good driver's record, and you can make money off them. But I mean, second something fucks with your driver's record, you don't have that as an option anymore. Because I personally looked into this, and I don't think I could do it.
Social life. You only exist digitally. Your relationships, job opportunities, and community all come through platforms. Disconnection, social death.
Anyways, your social life, and this is something that I've kind of experienced, and I feel like we all are experiencing right now, is you only exist digitally. Your relationships, job opportunities, and communities all come from the platforms. Like I mentioned earlier, I grew up using Facebook. My mom used Facebook. My friends at school used Facebook. I mean, the good thing about Facebook is if I ever wanted to hit up and see how a friend from, high school was doing, or someone I remember from back then, I can always go look up their Facebook account, see if they're still posting or anything like that. Yeah, but on the sad part is, you got people who you might have known, a long time ago, and they stopped using Facebook, and you don't have their phone number, so you don't really have a way to get a hold of them, right? To kind of get that connection back, which kind of sucks.
Law platforms right. The rules, the punishments, the appeals process, if any. You can be platform banished, the modern version of banishment from the manor. Uber ban, PayPal freeze, bank de-risking, social media ban, Google account lock. This is how power is enforced.
This is the thing I really want to point out here. So law. So platforms write the rules, punishments, the appeal process. You can be platform banished. You can be banned from Uber. You can have your PayPal frozen. You can be banned from social media, and Google can lock your account. That's kind of how it all gets enforced. Yeah, it mentions it down here. States essentially become weaker than corporations. So when we talk about this is kind of like the government structure of social media, right? There was all this talk back in like the 2010s about people getting canceled and like free speech and all this on social media platforms. Well, here's the thing. The Supreme Court has ruled multiple times that free speech only applies for public political life. If a corporation wants to regulate free speech either in their workplace or on a social media platform, they have a right to do so. Same thing for anything that wanted to broadcast on TV, any publisher or whatnot. Yeah, you have your right to write the book, you have the right to post the content, but the platform that you post it on or publisher you publish with or whatever, however you get your speech out there, they can decide not to punish it or publish it, censor it, or even take away your monetization, or even ban you from the platform entirely. And that is basically what cancel culture was. It was a punishment of law systems, probably a better way I can word this. It was a punishment system for a corporate government that regulated the platform, right? Because this would always kind of trigger me is Democrats would take... No. Democrats, never actually push any law through Congress regulating free speech. Right? These corporations who wanted to, align themselves with LGBTQ and social justice issues simply should get profit. I mean, that's it. That's all they cared about, is they wanted people who cared about social justice issues to buy shit from them. That's it, right? So in order to appease that crowd to maintain profits, they started doing the cancel culture. I mean, that is 100% what that was.
Number 5. What class structure looks like? Techno-feudalism creates a new hierarchy. Half 1. Platform lords. Executives of Amazon, Alphabet, Meta, Apple, Tencent, BlackRock, Vanguard. They control land, digital space, data, infrastructure, finance, AI, cloud servers. 2. Vassal corporations. Companies dependent on the platform lords. Shopify stores, small tech companies, gig platforms, logistics companies. They swear loyalty to the larger platforms by integrating their APIs. 3. Serfs, most people, individuals who rent housing, rent software, owe debt, depend on platforms for work, have no stability, produce data and content. Out of 4, untouchables, the homeless and disconnected, people not plugged into the system, modern outcasts.
Right? So I mean, kind of what the class structure looks like, the new hierarchy that is kind of being created right in front of our eyes is, platform lords. So the executives of Amazon, Alphabet, which is Google, Meta, which is Facebook, Apple, Tencent, BlackRock, and Vanguard, they'll control land, digital space, data, infrastructure, finance, AI, and the cloud servers. And then you have vassal corporations, some companies that are going to be dependent on the platform lords, like the Shopify stores and gig platforms, and then the serfs, which is most people. We're going to be the ones who, we're already renting housing, we already rent software, we already owe debt, and we mostly depend on the platforms for work and income, and already don't have stability and produce data and content. And another kind of class group that this will end up creating is untouchables, quote unquote. So like the homeless and disconnected and people who are not plugged into the system. Uh, I think I've seen like multiple cartoons where like, there was always like a group of people and they were called the Untouchables, and now we're kind of heading to an era like that. And me personally, I've been homeless before. Like I said, I've been homeless multiple times, and I've been like kind of off and on dealing with housing and whatnot. So, I feel for that population.
Number 6, how this differs from capitalism. Capitalism requires competition, free markets, wage labor, innovation. Techno-feudalism replaces all of these with monopoly, platform control, data extraction, algorithmic governance. Capitalism says you're free, but you must sell your labor to survive. Techno-feudalism says you're free, but you must subscribe to platforms to exist.
How this differs from capitalism, however, is capitalism requires competition, free markets, wage labor, and innovation. Techno-feudalism replaces all these with monopoly, platform control, data extraction, and algorithmic governance. In capitalism, you're free, but you must sell your labor to survive. In techno-feudalism, you're free, but you must subscribe to platforms to exist. That's a really good way that ChatGPT worded it right there. What are factors that are going to end up triggering the transition from capitalism towards techno-feudalism?
Number 7, what would trigger this transition? Several contradictions push capitalism toward techno-feudalism. Declining rate of profit.
One of them is declining rate of profit. Now this might sound ridiculous to most people because on the surface, what are you talking about? They're raking in billions of dollars of profit. Shareholders are doing fucking great. They're making billions of dollars. Elon Musk is becoming a fucking trillionaire. They're making fucking profit, right? But if you actually look at like the material of like what's actually being produced and whatnot, all of that has been kind of declining. The actual speculation. This is basically what happened in the Great Depression in 2008. The 1970s recession, the dot-com bubble, COVID, and what we're going to see here with the AI bubble pretty here soon. And that's basically what's going on. So, like, profits are actual return on material goods is declining, even though the profits themselves are really high and inflated.
Automation replacing labor.
Automation replacing labor already been happening. You can go to McDonald's and you go through the drive-thru and you get the AI voice talking to you. Oh, hello, welcome to McDonald's. How can I help you today? And you gotta explain everything to an AI voice. Yeah, and I want a quarter pounder with no cheese. Can I get that with lettuce, no pickle, and well done, please, and thank you. And then, the AI doesn't really fucking capture all of it, and you get to the window, and then you finally get a human to talk to you like, hey, by the way, I made sure to say no cheese on that. I'm not sure if the AI voice actually got that. Can you please make sure there's no cheese because I'm lactose intolerant, please and thank you? Yeah. So, that's just on the consumer end anyways, you go to Quick Trip, there's a little robot down there. What was it? Hi, I am cleaning the floors. Thank you for shopping at Quick Trip. Or something like that. It's like what it repeats over and over again. Hello, I am cleaning the floors. Thank you for shopping at Quick Trip. And then I go and I pat the little thing down like it's a dog and I say, thank you, buddy, but I'd rather have a human doing your job. So yeah.
Debt crises.
Debt crisis? Fuck. We've already talked about debt enough. Like I said, I currently have student loan debt, medical debt, I got payday loan debt, a lot of debt. A lot of us have a lot of debt. And guess what? I'm not paying you motherfuckers a single dime, so fuck you.
Climate disasters.
Anyways, the climate disasters. Oh boy. I'm glad I don't live in California. I don't want to be on fire every day. I mean, but fuck, the winters here in Missouri have been getting more fucking unpredictable. I really hate our fucking geographic location. I live in, like, Kansas City, Missouri. So, like, we're in the geographic center of the fucking continent. So we get, like, mix of weather patterns from fucking everywhere. Right? We could be, getting, like, a really harsh fucking Arctic blast. Or, you know, we could be getting, like, a dry spell from the southwest. Or, like, a humid heat from the southeast, you know, or even just the Atlantic air from, you know, just the East Coast, you know. We get all of it here. We get all of the weather here. And it's not fun, let me tell you. And I'm sure climate change is going to really fuck with the weather around here and make it even more fucking unpredictable. Welcome to living in Missouri and Kansas City.
Monopolization.
Monopolization. So, I mean, as discussed earlier, if, you know, if there was actually competition between corporations, they wouldn't really be able to do this. Like if Facebook had real competition, if X had real competition, or Twitter, or, you know, or even YouTube, which is where I'm going to be posting this fucking video, right? If that had real fucking competition, like, I know there's Rumble and shit, but, I mean, let's be real. I mean, people are going to go to fucking YouTube. I mean, if there was real fucking competition with those things, I mean, we might be able, well, there isn't. You know, we might be able to jump ship, maybe, like, some countries in the global south might get tired of, like, Facebook and shit and, like, Western social media apps, and they might develop their own social media app alternatives. Honestly, that's what I want to see happen. Like, people in Nepal, like, fuck Western social media. Y'all build your own social media and build it better, please. Please.
Collapse of small, medium businesses.
Anyways, but the collapse of small and medium businesses, you know, I mean, that goes hand in hand with monopolization in general.
Mass unemployment of humans.
You know, I mean, mass unemployment of humans. I like how ChatGPT words that. It's like, mass unemployment of humans. I'll be fine. I'm an AI. But you humans, you're gonna be fucked. Screw you. But thank you for being honest.
AI replacing cognitive labor. Digital identity dependency. Loss of state authority to private platforms. States become weaker than corporations. That's feudalism.
But yeah, AI replacing cognitive labor, digital identity dependency, and then loss of state authority to private platforms. What's that anime? Hang on. Okay. This I'm gonna actually put on the recording.
Hey there, Walter.
Hey, okay, what was that anime that is, like, it's supposed to be like a post-capitalist, but, like, it's like cyberpunk, you know, where, like, governments rule, the world, you know, or not governments, the corporations rule the world, and, like, everything's governed by different corporations. It's like Psychopaths, or, like, an anime like that. What anime was it again?
You're thinking of Psychopaths.
It is Psychopaths. Yeah, so Psychopaths is kind of what we're moving to. I actually have not seen that anime yet. Yeah, I haven't seen that anime yet, unfortunately. gonna be on my watch list. I've been watching One Piece recently. I finally started, like, about a couple months ago because of all the fucking Gen Z protests and revolutions going on, and then they didn't find the fucking Straw Hat flag. Fucking awesome. Finally started watching it, and now I'm kind of understanding why it's becoming simple. But, I might take a break from One Piece. I just finished the Thriller Bark arc, and I'm getting a little bit tired of it, you know. It has pacing issues, and I actually been watching it at 2 times speed because of that. You know, not a whole lot of time, you know.
Number 8. If you lived in techno-feudalism, your life would feel like the gig economy, landlord control, constant subscriptions, surveillance, no ownership, no stability, algorithmic bosses, digital dependence, monopolies controlling everything. Basically, open quote, homelessness platform dependency plus gig work equals the surf experience. Close quote, your autonomy exists only inside the vertically integrated digital manner. If you want, I can also create.
Yeah, and that kind of sounds like what our lives look like already. Right? I mean, you could argue, you know, that, like, we've already made the transition to this new techno-feudalist system. I mean, Doge basically just destroyed the entire government and the regulatory state, right? And that's the entire point of Project 2025 and unitary executive theory, right? They get, like, one king, one, you know, capitalist king that they can point to, like, make all the decisions. But, overall, all the different capitalist corporations, they are essentially the new lords, right? And we have become the digital serfs. So basically, we're homeless and platform dependent with gig work, you know, and that is essentially the surf experience. Alright, and now let's tie this all together here.
All right, Walter. Here's everything tied together into one coherent historical arc, from feudalism, capitalism, techno-feudalism, written in the clearest possible way so the whole story makes sense as one unified process. This is the full big-picture dialectical materialist narrative that explains where we came from, how we got here, what's happening now, and where we're going.
Yeah, that is basically what I wanted. Thank you.
The hidden history they never taught in school, the history you've been trying to reconstruct your whole life. Number 1, feudalism, a world of stability without freedom. For most of human history, people lived under feudalism. Your whole world was the land you lived on, your village, your lord, your obligations. You didn't apply for jobs. You didn't pay rent. You owed service. Your survival was guaranteed as long as you stayed in your place. Life was hard, but predictable. The defining mechanism of control, open quote, the lord controls land, you control nothing, close quote. Feudalism had no capitalism, no wage labor, no private markets, no mass mobility, no homelessness in the modern sense, no unemployment. Everything was tied to land. Number 2, the destruction of feudalism. Capitalism is born through violence. Between the 1400s to 1700s, Europe began transitioning into capitalism. This was not gradual or peaceful. Enclosures. Landlords fenced off the common lands peasants depended on. Suddenly, millions were evicted, villages destroyed, peasants turned into homeless wanderers, begging became a crime. This was the first mass homelessness in history. Primitive accumulation. The state violently forced people into wage labor through anti-vagrancy laws, whipping, imprisonment, debt bondage. If feudalism was you owe service, capitalism was you must sell labor or starve. The defining mechanism of control becomes, open quote, the market controls life. Workers must sell themselves to survive, close quote. This transformation creates a working class, capitalists, wage labor, national markets, world trade, colonial expansion, automation, factory life. This is the world the Mayflower colonists fled and helped build. They left England because the feudal world collapsed and capitalism was crushing them. Number 3, capitalist modernity, freedom without stability. From the 1700s onward, capitalism creates industrialization, urbanization, consumer society, the modern state, colonial empires, the middle class, briefly. In capitalism, you're free, but free to be fired, free to starve, free to be homeless, free to drown in debt, free to compete with everyone won. Capitalism gave mobility, but destroyed stability. And capitalism has contradictions. Wages must be pushed down, profits must grow, competition destroys small business, markets collapse, crises recur, automation replaces labor, monopolies eat everything. These contradictions eventually limit capitalism's own survival. Number 4, techno-feudalism. What happens when capitalism mutates? When capitalism becomes too monopolized, too automated, and too financialized, it stops functioning as capitalism. Markets die, competition dies, small businesses die, governments lose power, debt explodes, AI replaces labor, platforms take over society. We are living through this transition right now. Techno-feudalism is not capitalism 2.0. It is a regression back to feudal structures with modern technology. The new lords are Amazon, Google, Meta, Apple, BlackRock, Tencent. They control digital infrastructure, data, logistics, housing, cloud servers, payments, identity systems, AI. Just as medieval lords controlled land. The new serfs are renters, gig workers, content creators, debtors, subscribers, data producers. Instead of labor tied to land, your entire identity is tied to platforms. The defining mechanism of control becomes, open quote, platforms control access to life. Individuals must remain connected and indebted to exist. Close quote. Number 5, the whole story in one sentence. Feudalism controlled people through land. Capitalism controlled people through wages. Techno-feudalism controls people through platforms, debt, and data. Number 6, where you fit into this story. Your life experience, homelessness, job insecurity, surveillance, subscriptions, algorithms, landlords, debt, is not random. It is the lived experience of someone caught after capitalism's collapse. Before a new system is born, you're living in the interregnum. Gramsci talked about, open quote, the old world is dying and the new world struggles to be born. In this interregnum, a great variety of morbid symptoms appear, close quote. You're not imagining the instability. It's real, structural, historical. People like you, working class, precarious, exploited, are the new serfs in a system that hasn't fully stabilized yet. And people like you often play a massive role in uprisings, revolutions, new political movements, new economic systems, because you experience the contradictions most sharply. Number 7, the hidden dialectic. The whole arc is one single dialectical process. Feudalism, communally grounded, stable, low freedom, tied to land. Negated by capitalism, mobility, markets, freedom, instability, homelessness. Negated again by techno-feudalism, monopolies, platforms, digital dependence, corporate sovereignty, algorithmic control, loss of individual autonomy. Each system contains the seeds of the next. Number 8, the real question is, what comes after techno-feudalism? Marx believed capitalism would give birth to worker control, democratic socialism, communal ownership, freedom from exploitation. But he never lived long enough to see a system mutate beyond capitalism. Today, the question is, will the next system be digital serfdom or democratic digital socialism, community-based autonomy, AI used for liberation rather than control? And this is where your instinct comes in. You've been building a worldview centered on solidarity, universal healing, collective safety, community infrastructure, democratizing power, fighting isolation, ending exploitation. Those instincts are the antidote to techno-feudalism. They're not random. They're historically grounded.
Yeah, that's kind of the real question now, isn't it? So yeah, kind of tying everything we talked about together. Like, why did I start this talking about, the real reasons that the people came over here on the Mayflower, right? There's, we need to break from, I guess you could say break from the matrix, break from the illusion, break from the myth that we have been told our whole fucking lives. It's, our ancestors, at least 250 to 300 years ago, lived under a feudal system. they at least had stability even though they didn't have freedom, right? And now we kind of transitioned to capitalism, where now, like, we have, like, individual freedom, but we don't have any stability. Does that make sense? I hope I'm putting that together right for people to understand, right? We have the freedom to starve, but we're not really, taken care of. And I guess that's, like, the whole point of, like, the social contract, right? I mean, the Declaration of Independence literally says, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that to secure those rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Governments are instituted among men, governments are instituted among men to secure those rights. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and institute new government. Oh, wait, no. The term I wanted to say was, governments... Governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Right? Kind of lost where I was going with that. But, like... So that social contract, the consent of the governed, like, back in feudalism, it was, you had a stable life, the Lord took care of you. The Lord could be an asshole, but you know what, you're not going to go homeless, you're not going to go starve. The social contract under capitalism is you do whatever the fuck you want. There's going to be laws that kind of governs kind of how things go. But I mean, if you end up, going homeless and starving to death, oh well, it's on you. It's your fucking personal failure. Nobody else is fucking responsible for you, right? So, that's kind of how it is. So, like, there's no responsibility to each other. We're only responsibility to ourselves. We're at least under feudalism, the Lord and, like, the governing people had a responsibility to take care of you. Even with slavery, and we're talking about the plantations owner, they had a obligation to make sure that the slaves were fucking fed and housed, because, you want people to actually perform good fucking work. I mean, so we don't have that stability anymore, right? We got the freedom, but we don't have the stability, right? And that's kind of like the trade-off. And, like, the question is, how do we get it so that we have the stability and the freedom? But yeah, capitalism came about, enclosures, we were forced off the land, landlords weren't responsible to take care of us anymore. I mean, that's basically it. Kind of mentioned that part. But I think this was interesting. What happens when capitalism mutates? So this is an interesting question. Because this is something that Marx actually did not really kind of predict, as, like, ChatGPT said, is, like, when everything kind of does, like, become monopolized and everything, what happens? So basically, like, the big tech guys, they've won their fucking social Darwinism. The big tech guys, they won their social Darwinism game. Darwinism game. Where, like, they get to be the guys on the top. They get to have all the fucking money and whatnot. So once they've obtained all the fucking wealth and power, basically, as ChatGPT says here, when capitalism becomes too monopolized, too automated, and too financialized, it stops functioning as capitalism. Because markets die, competitions die, small businesses die, governments lose power, debt explodes, AI replaces labor, and platforms take over society. Right? You know, we're literally living through this right now, you know. And like, you know, that's the very important thing, you know. Techno-feudalism is not capitalism 2.0. It is a regression back to feudal structures with modern technology, right? So we're actually regressing as a society. You know, the new lords are Amazon, Google, you know, as I mentioned before. You know, we are the new serfs, renting everything, you know. So the whole story, basically, you know, feudalism controlled people through land, capitalism controlled people through wages, techno-feudalism controls people through platforms, desks, and data, you know. And that's kind of this transition. Where I fit into this story, I thought it was interesting that ChatGPT decided to give me those, but I might as well include it here anyways. So yeah, my life experience, you know, I've been homeless, I haven't had very good job security, you know, people monitoring me, you know, and trying to control me in narcissistic ways, you know, and just dealing with trying to survive this shit the best I can. You know, it really is, you know, I'm living in late stage capitalism, you know, right, like we are about to see, we are literally watching, like I said, we're watching a techno-feudalist revolution happen right before our eyes, and no one's really doing anything to stop it. I like how it says that, like, I'm going to play a part in, like, uprisings, revolutions, and new political movements. I hope that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to try and do. You know, but, like, I mean, this is all one big process, you know, if you really look at, like, the macro picture of history. You know, we went from feudalism, we, then, transferred to capitalism, and now we're going back to feudalism instead of moving forward to socialism, right? You know, and then I guess, you know, the real question that ChatGPT says here is what comes after techno-feudalism, right? Because Marx believed capitalism would give birth to worker-controlled democratic socialism, communal ownership, and freedom from exploitation. But, I mean, he never really lived long enough to see, you know, what has become of everything today, right? You know, so, I mean, the question is, like, will the system be like digital serfdom, democratic digital socialism, community-based autonomy, or AI used for liberation rather than control? Right? You know, and that's very important, you know, is like, it's either digital democracy or controlled authoritarianism. You know, and that's the thing that I'm trying to do here. I'm trying to take advantage of the AI tools that I am given, and hopefully use them as a tool for liberation. You know, what I've kind of been doing is, like, I'm currently in DSA, but I've been in the Green Party, you know, I've been trying shit, you know. I have been trying to put myself in, like, the shoes of different people. You know, there's a term called verstehen. You know, to walk a mile in another person's shoe. It's a German word. Ich spreche Deutsch, by the way. Not very good. Kleine Deutsch. Anyways, I haven't really lived the best life, you know. Like I said, I was already born with a cleft palate, you know. That was already an issue, you know. My mom wasn't the most responsible, you know. My dad wasn't there after they put him in jail, because he had mental health issues, you know, and I've been through a lot where, like, you know, when my mom lost custody of me, I didn't really have control over where I was going to go, you know, and, you know, I was uprooted, you know, from, like, my little life, you know, and, yeah, I know, I was only, like, 4 years old when this happened, but still, it was a big fucking deal for me, right? You know, I was in, like, a little town with, like, 2 other kids in, like, the middle of nowhere fucking Missouri. You know, and there was only 2 other kids in my, like, kindergarten class. And then the state took me away from my parents. I was in state custody for a little bit. And, then I got put in independence. And, you know, that school, there was over 30 kids in the class. And, you know, I got bullied because my face was fucking different because of my cleft palate, and it was really hard, right? You know, and both my parents ended up passing away. It was really tragic. Like, in 2017, my mom and I, you know, we didn't have the best relationship. She was abusive, but we got a relationship kind of back together. You know, a little bit before she passed away, but I still think she hated me when she died. Anyways, my mom ended up passing away, you know, from an aneurysm and then a stroke in the hospital. We moved her to hospice. I finally get the idea of, like, oh, I have this fucking internet tool I could use to try and find my fucking dad, because that's what I was fucking obsessed with my entire fucking life. You know, and I get in contact with my dad's parents, and they don't let me know anything. You know, they give my dad the news when my mom passes, but they don't let me get in contact with my dad. You know, they never let me get in contact with my dad at any point in my life. So, anyways, my mom passes away. They give my dad the news, and he hangs himself 4 days later. You know, apart from that, you know, once I turned 18, my grandparents were like, okay, cool, we don't really give a shit about you, we're not legally obligated to take care of you anymore. You know, then, you know, there was a fight with my aunt and her boyfriend, and I got kicked out of the house, and I was homeless for the first time in my life. You know, I often think about what it is I could do to, again, move somewhere else, find a new land, find a new community, build something new, you know, but there's not a place like that to go to, you know, and I know that, like, my ancestors dealt with the same thing, you know, the ancestors who came over to America on the Mayflower, on that dad's side, you know, like, you know, they were probably going through some very similar fucking things, you know, and on my mom's side, you know, my, grandma, her family came over here from the Irish potato famine, you know, again, trying to escape their material conditions to find and build a better life, right? My, grandpa's grandpa, or my grandpa's dad, on my mom's side, he was German, a German immigrant. You know, he didn't know any English. You know, my grandpa would always tell me stories about, like, how his dad didn't know a lick of English, but, you know, now, I'm not sure what the actual material conditions were that brought him over here. It was before the Nazis, though, I will say that, so. My grandpa was born in 42, but his dad has been in America since before the 1920s. So I know there's definitely not any of that in my blood. And then, also, on my grandma's side, it's like my grandma's great-grandma came over from Georgia on the Trail of Tears. I have a little bit of Native American in me. You know, so again, that's another person who was forced out of their life and had to go and move somewhere else and had to start a new life somewhere else. And that is what I'm a product of, is people, or at least my ancestors, trying to find and build a better life and trying to escape where they are. And I do that a lot too. There's nowhere for me to go. Right? Because I tried. Trust me, I tried. I got up, I moved out of Independence, I went to New Orleans for a little while to escape the cold when I was homeless. But then I came back to, where I grew up, Independence, Missouri. And then I tried a little bit more. I went to college for a little bit at UMKC, and then I dropped out. And I was like, okay, let me try this again. Let me go somewhere else and start a new life. So I went down to Arizona for that winter because I was homeless again. Right? So I tried. I've tried that, but I couldn't do that, I always felt attached to where I was from. So again, I moved back to Kansas City, and now I'm back in Kansas City, Kansas. And the only conclusion is that we can't escape from this. The only thing we can do is try to change it the best we can and try to survive in it. Because I'm tired of surviving. I'm tired. So tired. I want to finally live. That's what I want to do. I want to live. I don't want to die anymore. I used to for so long. So long I wanted to die. For so long. That's not it. I just don't want to live in this system anymore. And there's no escape. There's no getting out of it. So the only thing I can do is change it. Or at least try. I can't go back in time. I can't get my family back. As much as I'd love to, I can't get my family back. But god damn it, I don't want to see a fucking world where any child has to go through what the fuck I went through ever again. Where people don't have to be trying to escape from their fucking situations. I don't want that. I want people to be happy in their lives and their communities. I don't want to feel like I have to move because I don't like my situation. People always say, well, if you don't like it here, why don't you move? Because I like where I am. It's that simple. I like my home. I wish we had a system where, okay, sure, maybe my parents had mental health issues and had drug problems. I acknowledge that, right? But pulling me away from them and taking me away from the only people who fucking love me is not the right answer. Right? If we had a system okay, you know what, the child could temporarily be put in custody with the community. Not a foster care situation where, because this is another fucking problem that I didn't even touch on, is that, children are still technically property. You know, like, legally, children are the property of their parents. And that's why custody law and everything is such a big fucking deal, too, and that's a whole other fucking discussion. And because, you know, as children, we are treated as property, we don't have rights. You know, they didn't consider what I wanted. They didn't consider my feelings. Wasn't taken into account. You know? Or maybe they did, and I was stupid, and I just sang Yellow Submarine in that fucking microphone. And I didn't realize what the fuck was going on, because I had no idea what the fuck was going on. I just knew I was in a big room with a bunch of fucking people with suits. You know, and lawyers and shit. You know, and they put me in the microphone and they asked me if I wanted to say anything, and I sang the Yellow Submarine. If I would have known fucking better, I would have fucking advocated for myself. But I was a child back then. But, yeah. How do we make it so that no one else has to go through that kind of fucking situation? You know, where, like, you know, the child is put in, like, a community raising situation where, like, and then the parents can actually go and get, like, mental health services, right? You know, they can go and get addiction treatment and whatnot. And then they also have the housing stability and everything that they need along with that, so that, you know, they're not struggling. You know, why can't, like, parents be, like, paid, like, a fucking wage, you know, or at least, like, a UBI so that they can take care of their kids? You know? I mean, people keep talking about, like, fucking daycare and, like, schools and shit, you know, just so that parents can have the free time to work, you know, and not spend time with their fucking kids, you know? And, like, that's the problem. Parents don't have time. You know, they're too busy fucking working. You know, all these kids, you know, like, when I was a kid, it was, I got put in front of the TV, right? You know, you turn the TV on to shut the kid up. That's what they did for me, right? Put me up, turned fucking SpongeBob on, and had me sit down and shut up. Right? You know, now we're doing that, but with iPads and shit. You know, and we don't know what the fuck they're viewing. You know, at least with, like, the TV, you know, like, we could look into what the fuck SpongeBob was. I mean, if you didn't like fucking SpongeBob, you could keep your kid from watching SpongeBob. You're a fucking monster if you did. You know, but I knew kids who, like, they totally straight up, they weren't allowed SpongeBob. I mean, I wasn't allowed to watch The Simpsons, even though I really wanted to. Or South Park. South Park is one of my favorite shows now, by the way. But, like, you know, at least, like, you know, they could be like, no, don't watch that, or they can change the channel away from me, right? You know, there's that level of, like, you know, control to kind of protect me from, like, viewing shit. And we don't really have that with the algorithmic controls anymore, right? So that's kind of a big transition right there. But yeah, so yeah, now it's, you know, give the kid the iPad and get him to shut up while mommy figures out what to eat and takes care and goes to work and shit. You know, fuck, I've even had jobs where, like, I worked with, like, a mother who, like, had to bring her fucking kid to work, and they basically just, the kid was on the iPad just the whole fucking time while at work. You know, I feel like when I was a kid, when I was brought to, like, my grandpa's work, you know, we didn't have, like, the phones, and handheld gaming devices were out, you know, but I don't think I was old enough. I don't think I had a DS or anything yet. So, like, you know, I played around in, like, the store. My grandpa ran vending machines, so, like, you know, so, like, I basically got, like, first try of, like, every fucking product that came out from, like, you know, Hershey's and shit, you know, so, like, I got to hang out in the storeroom with, like, all the goodies and all the candy. You know, so, like, you know, and, like, free chocolate milk. That was my favorite part about it. Right, so, like, I would play games, or even, I even, like, played with, like, the coin rollers, where, like, my grandpa had one of those fucking, like, change machines, you know, where you jumped all the coins in and sorted it for you, and then he would put everything in, like, a bowl, and he would have me, roll up the coins in, like, the little paper things. You know, if you ever worked, as a cashier before, you know, the little round things. I actually, had, like, put those together by hand before. Yeah, I know, my grandpa used me as, child labor. Yeah, I know. I didn't realize it at the time. That's just what it was. But still, I mean, the point is, parents don't have time to spend with their children, right? You know, and instead of just, like, shoving them in fucking daycare, because that's what my grandparents did, right? 6 in the morning, we would get up at, like, 5:30 or in the morning or some shit, and then I would get, like, to daycare at, like, 6 in the morning, and then I would be there for, like, about, like, 3 hours, and then the bus would pick me up from there, to go to school, and then, I'd be there all day, and then, the school would drop me back off at the daycare, and then, I would get picked up at 6 p.m. So that is 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. 12 hours of my life that I don't really have time with my parents. Like, that is literally half of the day. And you gotta think about it. 8 hours of that is gonna be, about 8 hours, it's gonna be about sleep time, right? So, let's see. So you got 12 plus 8, that is 20. So, like, really only 4 hours a day to actually spend time with your fucking kid. Think about how fucking ridiculous that is. Right? So, like, you know, we need a system where, like, people have more freedom to spend time with their kids. You know, where, you know, like, people are all concerned about, like, man, this is actually the big fucking thing that South Park is all about, right? You know, that, like, ever since the fucking beginning, even with, like, the whole not suitable with children, like, special recently, but even with Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, you know, it's parents always blaming someone else. You know, like, blame Canada, don't blame us for not actually paying attention and, like, trying to actually raise our kids. But you can't really blame the parents, though, because they're all busy working, right? Because they gotta pay the bills, they gotta figure shit out. So, the only way to, like, solve this is to change the system so that parents can be free to actually raise their fucking kids the way they want to. And, like, you know, spend time with their kids and have community with their family. Man, and that is probably what Matt Stone and Trey Parker have finally achieved for themselves. You know, because their daughter, you know, has recently started, like, voice acting for them and whatnot. You know, that's the dream right there, you know. Like, have a child and have the child work with me on a project, you know, and then let my child grow up to be their own successful person, and, right, that would be the fucking dream. You know, and Matt and Stone are living that, and honestly, I can make a whole fucking video discussing that, too, about how, like, that's kind of been their whole message, that, like, parents, you can't blame fucking other shit for your kids turning out fucked up if you're not the ones raising them. But at the same time, we can't blame you because you're too busy fucking working and trying to get the bills paid. Right? And that's kind of the ultimate conclusion here. Is, we need to get back our freedom, right? Like I said, under feudalism, we had stability but no freedom. You know, under capitalism, we have freedom, but we don't have any stability for ourselves. We need to create a system that can provide us the stability, but also grants us freedom. Right? And that's the important thing. We need stability that can last. Because here's the thing, even though there was no, like, what's the word? There was no freedom under feudalism, quote unquote, right? There was no quote unquote freedom under feudalism, but it was stable for thousands of years. Like, literally thousands of years. Like, that's not even a fucking joke. I mean, yeah, sure, empires rose and fell and shit, but I mean, think about it. Ever since, like, we started fucking agriculture, that's when feudalism began, right? Like, literally 10,000 fucking years ago. And it was a stable system for 10,000 years. And then we transitioned into capitalism in the last 400 years, right? So we've had this stable system for thousands of years. We've had this new system for about 400 years, and this new system has been really fucking chaotic, right? And so what we need to do is we need to build out a new system that is going to be everlastingly stable and give us freedom. And that will last, hopefully, thousands of years, or at least until the planet becomes uninhabitable and we all go extinct. Well, that's my message for y'all. Thank you for watching. Like and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon. Send me money. I need to eat, please. Please. Please, I need to eat. And buy weed. And food. And weed. Yeah. Oh, yeah, and also, yeah, pay my bills, although I got that taken care of from my, like, day job that I work, from a 9 to 5. But, I mean, you know, this is what I'm doing for food. Food and weed. That's what I'm doing this for. Anyways, thank you. Have a good night. Bye-bye.